It's a Sunday morning. It's Mother's Day, in fact. Happy Mother's Day to all you mums out there. Yesterday we had a skip-in and we've been able to reclaim a part of our garden, which is lovely. This was obviously the area where all the soil and the rubbish had been piled up so I could keep it off the lawn during the winter months. But we've had some lovely weather the last week or so and we're itching to get out in the garden and enjoy the space again. So skip in, get rid of all that waste really quickly, and I can now crack on with some more excavation and carry on digging that centre portion out to create the foundation for what will be the patio. I had already started digging a little while ago, and this is before we had the skip in. I was bagging it up as we went, which is very slow progress. So I just wanted to stop and wait until we got the skip in so I could do it really quickly and efficiently. And as you can probably see, there's a few more additions to the pond. So we've got 13 fish in total, a nice mix of some goldfish, some shabbunkins, Sarassa comets, and obviously Casper, the original large white friendly goldfish. That's going to be the limit for the fish in this pond. I don't want to put any more in here. Again, these were some rescues from a pond that I drained and cleaned recently, and they needed a new home, so the kids were very excited to add a few more to the pond. And they're feeding and looking very happy. So not a lot to dig, but I'm just going to carry on scraping this out this morning before breakfast. Much quicker with the skip, fantastic. So that's that bit dug out. Next job is to put a membrane down over this soil. I'll also use a bit of pond fleece that I've got spare, and then to fill this centre void here with a mixture of some hardcore, because I've got a load of old concrete kicking around that rather than put it in the skip, I might as well break it up and use it, and then finish it off with a nice layer of some MOT or some scalpings that are going to be whacked down. The level's going to come up to just a fraction lower than the stonework here around the edge of the pond. So we've got about sort of 6 to 8 inches of sub base under here. I mean, it doesn't need to be quite as much as that for what will be a very small patio, but I'd rather be belt and braces and make sure it's not going anywhere. Now, the use of a membrane beneath the sub base is important for a couple of reasons. The first one is that we want to try and prevent any roots and plants and bits and pieces from coming through and potentially damaging the top finished layer of paving. It's unlikely with 4 or 5 inches of compacted hardcore or MOT that would happen, particularly in this area where there's not really any large trees or shrubs close by. The hedge isn't going to cause any issues. But another good reason for using a membrane is that you want to prevent the subbase from mixing with the soil beneath. This layer of fabric will provide almost an additional sort of security layer of structural cushioning and help to keep all of this tied in together. Now, I've got a load of old pond fleece which I'm using, and this is semi-permeable, so it will allow water to percolate down through from beneath. I've got a load of old concrete and rubble and bits and pieces that, rather than chucking the skip, I'm going to break up and use as a bit of hardcore, and then I'll finish this off with a nice layer of MOT which will be compacted down to provide a nice firm level surface. Level of hardcore is going to be up to about the top of this, or just a fraction lower than this ring of stone here. So we've got about 6 inches in total. That's more than I need for a small patio like this, but I prefer the belt and braces approach. It's at moments like this I wish I hadn't put fish in the pond. There's a lot of vibrations that are going to be going through. I don't want to stress them too much if I can help it. So sorry guys, it won't be for very long. Oh. Well, this is one way to build up an appetite for breakfast. That's pretty much it for breaking this up. I just had a little bit to get rid of. In general, my advice would be forget smashing up hardcore, chuck it in the skip, get yourself a load of MOT or scalpings, It's much quicker and less labour intensive to lay out and then whack it down. But I had a few little bits and pieces, and it's only a very small skip, so I just thought I'll break it up and get rid of it. So I'll rake this up around here now, and then I'll pour in a load of MOT to bring it up to layer, and then get a little whacker, a vibrator, and compact all this down, and we'll have a nice solid foundation for what will be the paving above. Well, that's the layer of MOT gone down, and that's nicely whacked into place, forming a nice firm foundation for the paving above. But I think I'm going to add or screed a layer of concrete over the top of this. The next stage for me is going to be to start building the walling for the two cascades either side. Now, I think initially when I started this video, I talked about putting the cascade here and here and having this seating area raised higher than it is. And actually, as this job's progressed, I've sort of got off that idea, and instead we're going to end up with a raised wall here coming up behind the back and then continuing along here, and we're going to have two spills either side here pouring into the pond. But I can't lay the paving until I've built those walls and the cascade, and we're going to want to use this area, and I know that if we put the table and chairs on top of this, it's going to scuff it all up and ruin this level surface. So if I screed over the top of this with an inch or so of concrete, it means at least we can put the table and chairs on here and we can use it temporarily. Well, good morning. I'm back again on my pond. It's been absolutely ages since I've posted anything or actually really done any work in moving this project forward. It's very frustrating actually. The pond aspect of it is completed, and it's really now just making sure I can crack on with the walling behind and getting both the cascades sorted out, one of which is working, the other side I've still yet to build. But like any project, first 90% is the easiest part, and it's the last 10% which is always really hard to complete. And I've just found it very difficult to find motivation to find a few minutes here and there to record and to actually crack on and get this finished. But I've got a day off today, so I'm going to do some work. What I think I'd like to do is to put the stepping stone in the pond over here. If you remember, on the early days of this project, I had cast a little concrete sort of platform that I'm going to render the stepping stone onto. As I've progressed with this project and I've looked at it, I'm sort of leaning towards not using that and actually having a natural stone sort of support onto which the stepping stone is going to stand. But as I went to the efforts of making it, I am going to have a go first of all at positioning it and see how it looks. If I don't like it, I can always remove it and then do something afterwards. Now, I've lived with the pond for the summer as it is, and I've got a really good idea of what kind of the maximum water levels are. Obviously, this is dictated by the overflow that I've got, but also by the position of the now concealed pond liner underneath the edging. Where there's low spots, water obviously is going to percolate over that. So I've got a really good idea of what the maximum water level is going to be, which is something that I've really wanted to make sure I paid careful attention to. I don't want the stepping stone too proud of the pond, because I don't want too much support above the water visible. I want to try to keep the stepping stone almost flush with the surface of the water. But equally, when the pond fills up with rain, I want to make sure that that stepping stone isn't submersed. So paying careful attention to water level and knowing what the levels of the pond are going to be has been very important. The fish have done so well in here. So we had, I think at most, 14 fish from various rescue missions and sort of rehoming jobs for some of my regular customers. The heron came down and took 3 of them, which was a real pain. But since then they've spawned multiple times, and I've got 2 or 3 generations of babies in here, from still some very small fry up to some of the older juveniles, which are now fully coloured already and are about 2 inches in size. So they're doing really well. So the numbers of fish in here have grown massively, and it's lovely to see this little shoal of youngsters cruising around. They're still too small to take the pellets, although they're coming up and they're taking bits and pieces from them. The planting is all done very well. I've had these 2 magnificent Lobelia cardinalis either side here, which sadly, if I'd videoed this a couple of weeks ago, would have been looking their best. They were up here with really, really bright, vibrant red flower stems, and they were looking gorgeous. They've just got past their best. They were getting a little bit top heavy, so I've just lopped the tops off so they don't end up blowing over and falling into the pond. The irises, both sides here, put on a great show this year. My variegated iris, which is quite difficult to establish, is taking and doing well. The lilies, 2 different colour lilies in here, have flowered profusely this summer, which has been lovely. And some of the oxygenating plant that I put in. A plant that I don't often come across, which is this one here, Potamogetum crispus, or curly leaf pondweed. It looks a little bit like seaweed, and I will get the camera close up in a minute. But this is a lovely, lovely aerating plant that will populate deep water quite happily, shady conditions, and here in the pond where it's gravelled all over, it's doing very well at just rooting down in amongst the gravel sections and looking very natural, so that's great. I've got some little bits of water hawthorn that I had propagated and planted, and they're coming into flower now, which is great. So next season there should be a load more of these lovely little arrow-shaped leaves on the surface, providing a little bit more cover. So it's all establishing and coming on really nicely. I've got the Oasa Elan FM Master working very nicely. So this is all now working via the cloud rather than just the home Wi-Fi, so I can turn on and off and control the devices anywhere around the world should I wish. The water blade here has been running nicely, and I turn this on now and again. It's rigged up on a timer, but really with the cost of electricity at the moment, there's no need for that to be on too often. It's just a feature, so I'll just put it on periodically when I want to enjoy it. Likewise, the lighting in the pond and the lighting in the strip light, all controllable via this, but only switched on now and again. It's actually at this time of year now, late September, mid-September, when the evenings are getting darker quicker, that I'm probably going to get more use out of the lighting, because it's still mild enough that we'll be out in the garden in the evenings, but it's getting dark early enough that we can get the lights on and enjoy them. So I've got to drain the pond down. It's going to be quite handy that obviously these 2 sections here will retain water for the fish. That middle section needs to be dry. I need to remove a lot of the plants that are in there, scrape away some of the gravel, and then the concrete support that I cast, I'm going to get that cut down to size and just position it dry in the pond with the stepping stone on top to see how it looks. So this is the Potamogetum crispus weed, the curly leaf pondweed, and it really does look like seaweed. It's almost like a succulent. It's kind of crispy. You can almost sort of crunch it. I don't often come across this, and I'm pleased that it's taken and established so well in my pond, and you can see how it's obviously enjoying just rooting directly into the gravelled sections of the pond. I suspect it's going to be something that will end up taking over, and I'll end up pulling lots of it out. But it looks great in here, I'm pleased with that. 2 different water lilies. This side was a little pink water lily, and this one was a white one. Again, a small variety just to keep it in scale, nothing too large for the pond. I have some Nuphar japonica brandy bottle. Lovely, lovely waxy green leaf here. And what I like about this is very similar to water lilies, although the flowers are nowhere near as magnificent or as showy as a water lily flower. They're just a small, almost a yellow sort of buttercup style flower with a bulbous centre. But it's nice that you've got an immersed leaf and some submersed foliage as well, so there's always something going on underwater. I think that's a nice bit of cover for the fish. For my marginals, obviously the purple irises, variegated iris, and these great lobelias, which I'm really pleased have done so well. And then I've got lots of little bits of this Nymphoides peltata, fringed heart water lily. Again, it's not a water lily. There's a bit more over this side here. And again, with the gravel in the pond, it sent out its runners, and then it's surface leaves reaching the top of the pond here quite naturally. And again, this is lovely. It's a very dainty little surface covering plant. Again, not very easy to establish. You buy it contained in pots and it doesn't like to remain contained. It likes to just run off and take over. And in most ponds that don't have substrate or aggregates on the bottom, it's not easy to get it going, but it's liking this pond. I'm hoping next year it'll flower. And again, these have got very small sort of buttercup yellow flowers that look quite nice. And then over here, when I've done the stepping stone, I'm quite looking forward to having some little pygmy water lilies in this shallow water. This is only sort of 10 to 12 inches deep. And the gravel itself down here is 4 or 5 inches deep. So it should be perfect for me to put some little pygmy rubras or some little pygmy helvola, just some very small water lilies that will have some pads at the surface and some flowers. I think it would be nice when you're stepping over here to be surrounded by plants. And also, look at the babies there. The fish are going to be a lot more vulnerable here in this shallow water. Obviously I'm netting it when I'm not enjoying it, and it's easy for me just to sling across a net, but I think in this area here it'd be nice to keep it well planted so the fish have got plenty of cover when they swim from one side to the other. It always amazes me that shabunkins, despite them being essentially goldfish, they're fry are born already with colour, so you know that you've got the shabunkin as the parent, whilst goldfish, you can see the little brown or black fish will start off life like that, and they'll take a season or two to colour up. At some stage I'll have to end up thinning these out and rehoming some of these elsewhere. I don't want to have too many fish in the pond. So I know the pond is currently at its maximum level. I'm going to make a reference of this so I know that what the water depth is. And then I'm going to drain the pond down, retaining all of the water. I'll leave the fish in position either side here, and I'll get this area cleared. And then I'll bring over the plinth and see how much of that I need to cut down. So I've got my beautiful assistant this morning. She's not speaking though. Right, pond has been drained. It's nice to expose the stonework again. It's been ages since I've seen it like that. It always looks deeper when you see it empty. I've got my monstrosity of the concrete plinth, which weighs an absolute ton. Now this is going to have to be cut down. Originally I was going to have it on its widest base with the stepping stone on top, but I think the overhang is too big and I don't want to reduce the stepping stone size down, so I have changed my mind and it's going to be going that way. But it's still a solid enough lump of concrete and a big enough base that when that's rendered into place, mortared into place, that's going to be okay. But it's going to have to be trimmed down, and I don't want to trim the top because I don't want to reduce the diameter of this foundation any more than it is, because that's perfect for the stepping stone. So it's going to have to get cut from the bottom, and I'm fearful that I'll end up losing so much that I won't be able to use this little tunnel that I spent ages creating. But it is what it is. If I have to cut it off, then I have to cut it off. It weighs a ton. Oh, bend with the knees. So I'm just going to position it dry and then mark it up against what I know the water level is. See, if that was the stepping stone on its own, that's about the right level, but obviously I need to reduce this down a bit so I can put the stepping stone on as well. So it'll end up something like that. See, that's already bang on the right height for the fish to be able to use this tunnel. And as soon as I cut this down, I think I'm going to lose most of that. But it is what it is. I mean, I could leave it at that height, you know, all it's revealing. Go on, wife, what do you think? What's your... This section here is going to be exposed above water level. I
think you should leave it.
You think I should leave it? Viewers, she thinks I should leave it. I think for the sake of really seeing what it looks like, I might fill the pond back up again so we can see what it looks like underwater. And then if I'm happy, we'll drain it again and put it into place. It's better to be absolutely certain. Right, off camera, I've had another measure up. I've checked the levels. I've had a chat with the powers that be. And I think, actually, I'm in agreement with my wife for a change, that we should leave this as it is, not cut it down. Based on the current height and the level of the pond, we've only got a tiny, tiny amount of this exposed above water level. And actually, looking at the position of the stepping stone, we really want to have it level with this edge. The central bit, where the seating area is, was deliberately raised and slightly proud of this. I wanted it to be elevated. But I don't think it's going to look any good if the stepping stone is lower than this surround, because you're going to be at one level, you're going to be dropping down to the stepping stone and then climbing higher to get to the central position. So I think the stepping stone wants to be level or thereabouts with this edge. So I've got a little bit of cleaning up to do on here. What did you say? She was in it. She was in it. So I've got a little bit of proud concrete from the cast, which I'm just going to smooth away and break off so that there's no kind of sharp edges for the fish, particularly if they do end up using this. And then we're going to get this into position. I'm going to use a very dry mix of rapid cement so that I can get this positioned and get it set. And the idea is that I want the whole thing completed today so that I can get the pond filled back up again. Now, this is a little bit risky. Obviously, cement, particularly rapid set cement, is going to be quite nasty and corrosive in the pond, and depending on how much mortar I use in here compared to the volume of the pond, I could end up with issues. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I'm only going to use such a small quantity of mortar in here that it's not going to have any dire effects to the water parameters and not going to cause any issues to the fish. But I have got a holding tank rigged up with some original pond water just in case. And if the worst comes to the worst, when I fill this up and I keep an eye on the fish later on, if they're showing signs of stress, I'm going to have to very quickly drain it down, whip the fish out and keep them in a holding tank and then refresh the pond water. But I'm hoping that I won't have to do that. Well, I don't have a tremendous amount of time to play around with this. The rapid cement, especially as it's a brand new bag I've just opened, tends to go off very quickly and isn't very workable after sort of 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm just initially going to put a little pad of mortar down. There's always so many aeroplanes going over my house now. There never used to be. That's Farnborough Airport. Doing very well, I'm sure. So I want to get this plinth raised up so that I've got enough of a gap for a depth of the sandstone paver and 3/4 of an inch to an inch or so of muck underneath it. Now, if you remember when I was constructing the pond originally, this is already a nice thick sort of 4 to 6 inch concrete foundation beneath the pond liner. So this is going to be sitting on a nice firm stable surface, so this shouldn't go anywhere. Now obviously it needs to be central. I haven't measured up as such, I'm going by eye, and then when this is in position I'll have a measure and see how it's looking. Oh, it really is heavy. Excuse me, fish. So I want to make sure that this little tunnel through the foundation here is square and sort of face on, which it is. I'm going to remove my microphone so I don't lose it. Hopefully you can still hear me. And put my waders on properly, otherwise I'm going to get very wet very quickly. Perfect, okay. So I can get this knocked down. Distance wise, let me just use this as a bit of a gauge, see how central we are. Okay, so that's got to move over a little bit that way. Bang on, okay. So I'm moving it slightly further this way to the left because I need to allow for a slight overhang for the surface stones once that paving is being done. So we'll get this level. That's it. And that I'm happy with. So I've got about a finger depth of mortar beneath this, so 3/4 of an inch to an inch or so, which is sort of keeping it, tying it in with the depth of the joints underneath the paving slabs there, so that's perfect. Good. I'll just smooth around here to create a bit of a buttress to support this and stop it from moving anywhere. And that should provide a nice stable foundation onto which I can cement that stepping stone. It's not looking too big, which is nice as well. I was fearful it might end up taking up too much room in the centre, displacing a little bit too much water and taking sort of valuable planting and pond space here, but it doesn't. There's plenty of space all round. I'm glad I didn't opt for 2 stepping stones. I think one is going to be absolutely fine. Right, I've finished smoothing this off. I'm going to let this harden for 20 minutes, half an hour before I think about putting the paving stone on top, and then we're good to go. Now this is the Indian sandstone that I cut out a long time ago. I've made sure it's clean, it's dry, I've brushed off any sort of dust and loose bits. Very important that it's dry, because when I position this and sit this on, with it being sandstone, it's going to absorb a certain amount of the moisture from the mortar, which is going to help to impregnate that cement into this stone and create a much better bond. If the stone was wet, it's just going to sit on top of that cement as it hardens and not ingress into that stone or permeate into that stone. So it's very important that this is dry. So put a bed down on here. If you're interested, this is my usual 4-to-1 mix. 2 parts builder sand or soft sand to 2 parts sharp, 1 part cement, and then with the usual little bit of plasticizer mixed in. Now I'm using rapid cement on this. Blimey, how expensive has that got recently? £25 for a 25 kilo bag of rapid cement. That's gone up about 10 quid in the last few months. Not good. As I say, I'm aiming for a bed about 1 inch or so in thickness, about the depth of my fingers on my hand when it was laying flat. And that should raise the stepping stone just up to the level of the edging stones. And I'll make sure this is a really nice full bed that the stone sits on. There we go. Gloves off so I don't stain the stone. The tricky part here is going to make sure that I've got the stone central to the foundation. reckon that's pretty good. Have a look from the distance. That looks pretty good to me. So we can get this knocked down to the correct level. Making sure this is absolutely dead level. Because when the pond is filled up, it's going to be very, very apparent if it isn't. Okay, so that's nice and level. This is sitting about 4 or 5 mil higher than the edging stones here. I'm happy with that because of course this side is going to be elevated. So although this couldn't be lower than this, a slight protrusion is not going to be noticeable. I'm happy with that. So a slight step up and then a bigger step up. Again, I'm going to have a little walk around just to make sure that I haven't moved this and this is still central to the support underneath. Right, I'm happy with the position, happy with the level. I'm going to clean up underneath here now. Right, that's the stepping stone on. I'll let this go off and won't touch it for the next hour, so it's really nice and firm. I'll clean up some of the loose bits that I've spilt. I can rake the gravel back over and then I can get the pond filled up. And that's when I'm really going to get an idea and be able to gauge whether I'm happy with the height of this stone or not, and whether I'm happy with the foundation or if it needs to be removed and I construct something out of natural stone. I think this is going to be fine. I think when it's submersed underwater, we've lost most of this. This is going to naturally develop a kind of a patina of algae growth on it, so it's all going to blend in very nicely. What I need to be very careful of though, of course, is paying very close attention to the fish to make sure that there are no visible signs of stress over the next day or two with this being filled up with the cementing. Right, well the stepping stones had long enough to cure, to harden off, so I'm going to get the pond filled up. It's very tempting to stand on that and have a go, but I'm going to wait until tomorrow before I do. I'm really pleased with the height and the position of that little tunnel through the foundation stone there. Perfect height, just right for the fish and for any other wildlife to be able to swim through and hide away. So very pleased with that.